This week on Head to Head, the Rise of Skywalker spoiler review.
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this podcast. This is a moment we've been waiting for a week to do.
Thank you, Jesus.
You know, after seeing this movie, heaven only knows how many times at this point.
Right.
We finally get to do our spoiler review.
Yes.
We're trying to be cool to you guys. We could have done it last week. There's a lot of other shows where they did theirs, like Saturday, Sunday, or whatever. And we're like, you know what? No, let's give people a week. Not everybody could see it on opening weekend.
Mm-hmm.
But now all bets are off.
Yep.
The spoilers are upon us. So let's get right into this.
Yeah, man. So I really don't like when...
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
Well, I mean, now we can just go back. Even though last week on our non-spoiler review, we did go over our thoughts and everything. Right. But maybe we should do that again now that basically the chains are off and we could just...
Yeah, speak freely. Permission to speak, sir.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. Well... So from the opening crawl, it basically kind of gives you the whole thing that, Palpatine kind of let this broadcast slip out that, he's basically alive and I won't say well, but he's alive. So, everybody was just kind of like, okay, picking up on that. Like, what the heck?
Now let's start right there.
Yes.
Because here's my thing. And this is one of the things that I was actually a little bit tiny bit critical. Because as you guys know, I do love this movie. Mm-hmm. I thought it was great. Did everything I wanted this movie to be. It was pretty much... I mean, do I have some minor issues or criticisms? Yeah, sure. But, it wasn't like The Last Jedi. If you remember... Mm-hmm. And I meant to bring this up on the non-spoiler one, actually. But The Last Jedi, I remember when you and I came out of the theater... We were kind of like silent. We didn't say anything for probably
a couple miles.
5 minutes. Yeah. And it wasn't like we were just avoiding the movie. We didn't say anything. I mean, that movie just put us in such a weird mental place or something. And
yeah, we just kind of process it.
Yeah, and you didn't really know what to think of it. And to be honest, eventually, after I saw it a couple more times, I decided, you know what? I like the movie. Mm-hmm. It wasn't what I wanted, but I felt it was a logical place for the story to go. And, I thought as a movie it worked. But The Rise of Skywalker, completely different. I love this movie.
Okay.
I love everything that it was trying to do. It felt like a Star Wars movie. I left with a really good feeling and, a good vibe. But again, little minor things, little minor issues.
Okay.
And right from the opening crawl, and you get this sense, a few minutes into it, is that, okay, Palpatine ends up broadcasting like, hey, guess what? I'm back. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like everybody's just like, yeah, all right, cool. No. I don't really think they would have reacted that way.
Well, who do you mean? Who do you... I guess who are you referring to? Well, I mean,
it's just sort of like everybody just treated it matter-of-factly. Now, I don't know. I don't remember if this was ever really confirmed, where they talked about how, it was like a year after The Last Jedi or something.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if they really...
Did they actually confirm that as official?
Not that I know of.
I know some time had passed.
Definitely. It's definitely a little bit of time has passed.
But I think...
Probably at least a year.
The general consensus was 1 to 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, sometime within this 1 to 2 years, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of, don't get me wrong, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of this stuff in novels and comics and, just like extra, canon stuff.
Platforms, whatever.
Articles, whatever. But it just seems to me that after 30 years, if Palpatine just suddenly came back when everybody thought he was dead, this would be more of a crazy shock that people wouldn't just...
Well, no, I think everybody was freaked out, especially the rebellion was just kind of like, wait, he's how? That was everybody's look when they were standing around. They were kind of looking around like, oh, he's back? Well, how the heck did that happen? And that's one of the things that I didn't like about this movie is that they never told us how he came back or what happened.
Yeah, that is a good point, actually, is that they never really addressed how
hello?
he came back.
Like, okay, you got launched down a reactor shaft. Like,
maybe that's what I'm talking about. Maybe that's what I'm actually talking about.
Yeah.
It's not so much... Yeah, you're right. I guess they did put some adequate reactions, but it was like they never really explained it, and maybe that's what I'm reading into the characters' reactions.
Okay, then that makes
that's
sense.
what I'm talking about, is the fact that it's like, okay... Palpatine's just back, and everybody's just like, oh, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Nobody's really going, well, how did that happen?
Yeah, exactly.
And right, he fell down a shaft. Now, here's the thing. And this is I'm going to play devil's advocate in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Not too many people actually knew how he fell down
I was
the
just
shaft.
about to say that, yes. I was
You know
just
what I mean?
about to say
It's like,
that.
because that was something that only Luke Skywalker knew. Now, I don't know exactly how much he shared with the universe.
Well, he probably just told Leia what happened. And then, of course, after a while, the Empire fell. You heard no more of the Emperor. It's not like he was rebuilding. Well, even when the First Order came back, now it was all Snoke.
I wonder how many of the normal, general citizenry or whatever actually knew that Palpatine had died.
Yeah,
they might have just...
They knew he died. They just didn't know how. Because that's what everybody was saying. Like, he was dead.
Right. And then it wouldn't be like, okay, he was... because when you fall down a shaft, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's not
now, it should be noted, though, that Darth Maul got cut in half and fell down a shaft, and he was still with us, so...
Oh, yeah, but at least they kind of, explain that, though. That's
true.
My point.
But they didn't explain that. Well, then again, he didn't really pop up until Clone Wars either, so...
Right.
It wasn't like you saw him in Solo, and it was like, whoa.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe that's it. They explained it first. But that was one of the first things that, we see, and that's a good criticism. They never really explained it. But, sometimes, and this is one of the things I actually liked about Star Wars, is the fact that they didn't feel the need they had to explain everything. Like, for instance, in A New Hope. Now, granted, it does start out in the middle of the story, but we didn't know that in 1977. There was a lot of things that were just for granted. They didn't explain...
Well, yeah, and that's because that's something brand new, though. Like, Star Wars was a new thing.
Well, and
itself.
that goes into what I was saying last week when it was the problem and the reason why people have become critical of these films is because there's so much content, there, and there's so much lore, and there's all the content that you can't do what you used to do.
Yeah, it can't be just like, oh, well, this person just happens. Like, well, no, they can't just do that because all these other things have led up to this. So it's like, that can't just be, and I think so when you're dealing with, so that was my biggest thing. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Like, how's he back?
How is he back? And then, okay, he broadcast this thing. So now, okay, both sides are freaking out. Kylo's freaking out and so is the rebellion.
Well, and that's one of the things that I thought was actually kind of cool about the opening crawl. The way that it was written was it was like, Kylo was going to go there to kill him. Yeah. It's like,
because you're threatening my power.
And I
Which we talked about.
And I thought the way that was written was just really, really cool. He wasn't going there to try to see
train me. And all this crap.
This is my grandfather's master. It's like, you got to go.
Yeah. I know who you are and I know what you...
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're still around...
Yep.
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to do.
You can't be as strong as you used to be, so I probably got some...
I got a chance.
Yeah, I got a chance with this. So, yeah, I like that. I liked how the fact that, once again, you see, Palps is over there, screwing around with Kylo. When he finally finds him on Exegol. Yeah, Exegol. And he, Kylo goes there. He's looking for him. And just even getting to Exegol, I mean, you got to have the Force just to get there, man. Because that thing was almost like the Kessel Run, just trying to get into the stupid thing.
And here's what we'll do too as we go along with this. Because I was trying to figure out what would be the best way to do our spoiler review. It's there's how everybody else does it. Everybody does it differently, and I figured let's just do what we always do and just kind of go through the movie and give our thoughts. But one of the things that I also want to point out, and I will throughout. And I'm sure you will too with your things, is that whenever we predicted something, we should talk about what we predicted and how it
actually panned out.
Either actually panned out or was different. With this, I think we kind of nailed this. We said that Palpatine was going to be in the unknown regions. And that's exactly where Exegol is. Exegol is a Sith planet in the unknown regions.
Yeah.
Wasn't Mordor, like what we were hoping, but...
Yeah. So Kylo gets there and he's like, all right, as soon as he gets out his little TIE fighter, man, he's saber drawn, he's ready.
Yeah, he's ready.
And then he gets in there, and then of course, the Emperor's like, all right, my boy, I've been every voice inside your head, since.
Now here's what's interesting. You obviously didn't know this based on your comments to me in the car when we were driving back. That whole scene was in one of the TV spots.
Yeah.
Did you see that one? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. It didn't seem like
I knew about that.
Yeah. No, I just seemed like you were kind of surprised.
No, I mean, I just loved this. You're
just talking about like seeing it in context of the film, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was like, that was one TV spot. Because remember how I said I was going to avoid them all?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just accidentally see them.
Yeah.
TV's on, you're watching some, and it's like, oh crap, it's Star Wars one.
But I have to watch it.
But now. I have to watch it now. It's like I can't not watch this. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, when that happened, so of course you're hearing like, the Snoke, and then of course you hear Vader in his head, and it's like, this has been me the whole time, basically.
Yeah, and then of course, and let's talk about this. Now he talks about how he created Snoke, and then you see like all these little Snokes in test tubes or whatever. How did you feel about that?
I thought there was, okay, once again, see it, and what I accept it because, Palpatine from pretty much the onset, and if you guys really stop and think about it, like if you really go back to Episode 1, he's always been into the whole, like, I guess in this day and age you would call like STEM technology type stuff, because he was always obsessed with creating life, creating stuff out of the Force, or creating his own thing. So
yeah, it was kind of like an extension of the whole Plagueis thing. So Plagueis was obsessed with it. He was Plagueis' apprentice, so therefore he became obsessed with it as well.
Right. So now that's where of course you get the clone army. The first clone, that's Palpatine's whole thing, and just. Even in witchcraft and all that type of stuff, because then that deals with Dathomir and Maul and that whole situation. So he's always kind of played around with that stuff. So it doesn't surprise me that Snoke was like a creation of his.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense too when you look at Snoke's appearance, because a lot of speculation led around. Well, is Snoke somebody that we know and he was injured? Was he in a fight? Was he? Mm-hmm. And it turns out that he's just
large Freddy.
Yeah, he's just this corrupt, being that Palpatine created.
Yeah. Now, here's my question once again, though. This is where I feel like they rush stuff. It's like, okay, I get the fact that Palpatine created, Snoke. Mm-hmm. But how do you just ascend to this whole First Order thing?
Well, yeah, and the thing is that, just to catch us up, one of the things that Palpatine does is he basically shares his plan. He's like, listen, you came here to kill me, but
I have something that you want.
Yeah, I got something that you want. And then, of course, this is when we see that whole big Sith fleet that we were talking about, like all those hundreds upon hundreds of Star Destroyers, all these things. He was like, look, here's my plan. You're the leader, the supreme leader of the First Order. But now I want to create the Final Order. This has been the plan the whole time. Mm-hmm. Now, Snoke's gone because you killed him. But you could be the supreme leader now of this Final Order.
Mm-hmm. Basically the new Emperor.
If you basically...
Bring Rey to me.
Bring Rey. And that's all we know so far. We don't really know. And then, of course, Kylo has somewhat of a negative reaction, and then it's kind of like Palpatine's like, no, you don't really know the whole story about this girl, let me tell you. But then they don't... Yeah. They kind of cut away from that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the idea is that, Kylo went, we picked up the action, he's defeating that one thing in the trailer where he's defeating all those
Village.
Yeah, whatever those guys were.
Yeah. They look like Mongols or something like that.
Yeah, he's basically, I forgot who they were. They actually mentioned it at some point, but not in the movie that I saw. But I mean, it was one of those things that in one of the big articles about the Rise of Skywalker, they talked about who they were. And pretty much what you see is him getting to Palpatine, trying to find him. Then he finally finds the location, meets up with him. Now Palpatine sends him on this mission.
Right.
Basically, bring me Rey. You don't know the whole story. I'm going to tell you the story, and then then it cuts to the scene with Poe and Finn, right, and Chewbacca.
Yep.
And it's kind of like they're being chased.
Yeah, they're on their way. They're trying to get information from some spies because, of course, they find out, too, that Palpatine is alive. And so they're like, okay, they're trying to find out this information. Once again, they're using the spy technique. And on this one particular planet, I guess these aliens or, race of people kind of have this information that they're trying to share with them. So the First Order is on their tail. And so they fly in the Falcon. They meet up with the guy. They drop down this long,
Now here's what's interesting.
VGA cable.
In Chapter 7 of The Mandalorian, which, of course, we're going to review, along with Chapter 8 in another week. But they actually showed that whole scene after the credits.
Right.
So that was something that I ended up watching. And then, it was kind of funny because that scene comes up like pretty much right away in the movie, right after the whole Palpatine-Kylo scene.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is where it goes.
Context,
and this is cool because I like the fact that once again, you're getting that easy character banter. They got some good chemistry. They're telling a bunch of jokes. They're doing pretty much a very Star Wars-y type of a thing. Yeah,
definitely. It definitely kind of puts you back in that whole solo mode, actually.
Yeah, yep.
So it was weird to see Poe piloting the Falcon. That was weird. But you could kind of understand why, though, at the same time. So,
now it's kind of like everybody pilots it. It's just like whoever has the keys or something. Yeah. It's like it used to be strictly Han Solo's ship. And now it's like anybody that's basically free.
Yeah, exactly.
gets to pilot the Falcon now. But it's funny how used to that I've become.
Yeah, I know, right?
Because at first I remember in Force Awakens when Rey piloted it, it was like, oh, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Now it's fine.
Yep. But yeah, they basically got this long VGA cable. They basically plug it into R2, drop the information into R2, and then they got to book it out of there. And as they're trying to book it out of there, of course, it's a little intense space battle where they're of course
and that was
the TIE
really
fighters.
That's one of the first things where we just see this incredible action that JJ's put together. I mean, I have to say this movie is nonstop action. There's something going on. It moves along at a very brisk pace. And even though a lot of people have criticized this, I actually think that that's one of the stronger parts of the movie.
True.
Let's just get on with it.
It's no waste of time.
Right.
And, even, of course, the cinematography of it all is just beautiful.
Oh, there's just beautiful shots in this movie. I mean, I remember there was that first scene, I think it was like right after, maybe it was leading up to the Palpatine scene. It was either that or the one leading up to the Poe scene where there's like kind of this reddish type of thing and these TIE fighters are flying in. And I'm like, man, that could be like a wallpaper right there. We're like 5 minutes into the movie and already I see what I want my wallpaper on my phone or my desktop to be,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I mean, they're flying. This is the cool thing they added in. It was like, light jumping. That was cool.
Yeah, that
because we've always
like quick jump thing or whatever.
Yeah, so it's kind of like we've all, and this is what was cool, and this is how I liked how they tied it into Episode 4 is because how I was always like, well, why can't we just go to light speed? He's like, well, traveling through light speed is like just like you can end up in anywhere. Like you end up in a supernova, you can end up anywhere.
Because the Navicomputer has to react. But now, 30 some odd years later, it's kind of like the Navicomputers are probably a little bit quicker and
but
can respond faster. So you do this micro jumping is what they called it.
Yeah, and so basically, he's just keep shooting across to different planets, and so we see some familiar territories in that what also was freaky to me was that TIE fighters actually have hyperdrives on them now.
Yeah.
I was just like, whoa. So
yeah,
that was
there was
cool.
a lot. You know, the First Order did advance quite a bit in this movie. I mean, there's throughout the movie, you saw things that were quite a jump, which,
No pun
again,
intended.
it was something that you saw in The Force Awakens, the difference between the First Order and the Empire, right? Mm-hmm. But in The Last Jedi, you really... One of the problems that I had with The Last Jedi was the stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it felt really more like a Battlestar Galactica episode than a Star Wars movie to me. Because you had this really slow... Not that I didn't appreciate the story, except for the Canto Bight part, but I like the fact that, you know, you're going to different locations. You're basically seeing the advancement of both sides. Because, you know, the Resistance actually has a few new toys as well.
Well, yeah, I think, but the thing is, the reason why you don't really see that is because of it picks up directly after Force Awakens.
Well, yeah. I mean,
So it's basically almost like one big...
yeah, that is true. That
story.
is one big story.
Yeah.
But the difference is that you see more of...
Yeah, I mean...
You know what I mean? You see more of it, though. My point is that you could see more, like, within the First Order, if you could see more things.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
See what I'm saying? It's kind of like we didn't really see too much. And again, I'm not saying that you got to cram everything into something. I mean, if the story doesn't call for it, certainly don't do it. But
Well, yeah, I mean, we got...
that's what I liked about this movie in contrast.
Well, that's what I mean. You got a chance to see that in Last Jedi with that whole... I mean, you really did because, like, of course, Starkiller Base, and then, of course, the Dreadnought, that was a big thing. Then, of course, and that was in The Last Jedi was Dreadnought. And then, of course, you had that super laser thing that basically could, like, blow a hole into that whole thick wall that they had on Crate. So, I mean, you did kind of have some new technology that you kind of got a chance to see.
Yeah.
But... You know, in this Rise of Skywalker, let's see, pretty much like after that, you know, of course, we see Rey, you know, and she's off in the trees, you know, floating around, levitating, you know, practicing her Force stuff. And that was really cool just to see her kind of like, all right, she kind of had
I couldn't
some
help
extra.
but think, I mean, it's so stupid, but the whole time I'm thinking of, like, the Ace Ventura thing where it's like, I'm practicing my mantra.
Especially her being in the jungle. So, yeah, that was a perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of thought about that, too. But, yeah, then she was basically saying, like, okay, you know, stay with me, you know, be with me. And then she kind of lost it. But she kind of still had control over herself where she's just not dropping and falling how Luke you would. You know, when he was sitting on his head, she kind of just actually landed.
And, you know, we can address that, too. There's two things, if we're dealing with Rey and Kylo now, that I really liked by this point of the movie. And this is even before we get into too much of who Rey is, which, of course, we find out. But I like the fact that, unlike the previous movies, Kylo is extremely powerful. Mm-hmm. Like, he's really come into his own. I mean, he's really powerful, and he exuberates that confidence, the power that he has.
Yeah, especially once he gets his
I loved Kylo in this movie.
Especially when he gets his helmet put back together.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we also still see that he's still connected to Rey through the, you know, the whole mind thing.
Right. I mean, the thing that I really like about Kylo is somewhat of a quasi Sith Lord, because it's not like he really ever became really a Sith.
Nope.
Even though the Sith are in this movie, oddly enough, he's kind of like a pseudo Sith. I mean, he's filling that role without question, but it's like he's not really there yet, you know?
Yeah.
And the thing that I like is that there's a very, unlike the other Sith Lords that we see, there's a very human element to him. Mm-hmm. You never really saw anybody like him before.
Right.
It's almost like he's Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader rolled into one guy.
Yeah, like they're almost like a split personality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which they kind of address a little bit later.
Of course.
Yeah.
But the flip side of this is what I really liked about Rey is that even though she was super powerful, and you later find out why. I didn't feel it was so much of the Mary Sue element.
No.
That you had before. It was like, it made sense. She had the Jedi tech. She was consulting them.
Yeah, she was steadily studying those things.
Which I really liked the fact that she was going back and looking and, trying to,
piece it together.
Yeah, like a reference.
Yeah. I think the other thing, too, is like, with Rey being powerful, it was kind of like you kind of got to see how valuable she was to the team at this point, because we last left her in Last Jedi, like, yeah, she was able to like lift all those rocks and so everybody could escape, but like at this point, like she's still connected to Kylo. She's running through her paces, it's like, okay, and she's like really truly committed, like, all right, she gets done with one exercise, all right, you know what, I'm about to run the whole little gauntlet type thing. And so she's running through that. And then, of course, she's still struggling with some of her issues. And I still like that element about it. She has way more control over her abilities and powers. However, she's struggling through. She still has that internal struggle.
Where is my place in the universe? Mm-hmm. Who am I really?
Exactly.
Why am I? Okay, it's like, yes, I'm doing all this, but I really don't know who I am or what I'm supposed to do. And this is where we can get into a lot of the Leia scenes, too, because, Leia, you find out, is actually training her. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was really incredible how they were able to, out of this unused footage, how they were able to cobble this together in a very convincing way.
True, and to make it make sense, yeah.
And to make it make sense.
Yeah, definitely. Leia, she definitely gave her that motherly, which is cool because like she kind of got like the discipline and stuff from Luke. So she kind of got the father side from Luke, but then the loving tenderness, the care, the hope, the belief, she got that from Leia.
Yeah, it makes me wonder too, like, if Carrie Fisher had still been with us and now JJ was in charge of it, it wouldn't surprise me if like Leia almost became the Luke of the movie, where she was really full blown training her, where there'd be like new scenes and she'd be doing all this stuff. And,
right.
But still, first of all, like we said last week, she was in the movie way more than what I think either of us ever thought.
Right.
And the way in which she was in the movie, even though I can understand what some people were saying, but I don't know, it worked for me. I
believed it. I
believed it. I did not find it
jarring or anything.
As jarring, as what some people did. And I think maybe that's because psychologically they knew.
Yeah.
That's the best way that I can explain it.
That's the problem sometimes with knowing too much about something, is because now you're looking for the cracks in it as opposed to just accepting it for what it is.
Yeah. Right. Sometimes people just have to sit back and
just
chill.
Enjoy it. Yeah. The other thing too, I did notice is that there seems to have a little bit more hostility between Poe and Finn.
Well, that was the thing that, not only that, but one of the things that I found simultaneously intriguing, but also bothered me when you compare it to, say, the original trilogy or even the prequels with Obi-Wan and Anakin, is the fact that they were all kind of hostile to each other. Like, they didn't really seem like they were really friends so much, know?
Yeah. Well, it kind of had that whole New Hope vibe, like you said, like, because there you had Han, who's like the hotshot pilot, who's always kind of like, not believing in the Force and doesn't care about all that. And then you got Luke, who's trying to learn about it. And then you got Leia, who has her whole responsibility.
Right. But here's the thing. What you're talking about is dead on, and it just shows what I'm talking about is the fact that, yes, they had that attitude in the first movie.
Right.
Not the final movie.
But see,
that would have irritated me, and I get it. They really didn't interact that much.
Right.
But that's my problem. That's my problem with the sequel trilogy. You get these people who are supposed to be kind of like the new Han, Luke, and Leia, and you never have them interact.
Well, I think that was kind of what JJ really wanted to do. That's why, we see later on where Lando addresses that. Like, you guys gotta, like, he's like, well, how did you guys do this? And it's like, well, we had to. Like, we didn't know, and that's what I loved about that. It was like, look, man, we didn't know what the heck we were doing at the time either.
And I gotta say, speaking of Lando, first of all, Billy D. Williams is great.
Yeah.
He was actually better than I expected him to be.
Yes, yeah.
The other thing, I know this is petty, but I am so glad they put the Lando hairpiece on him.
Oh.
Instead of like where he has that close-shaved head. I was scared to death, leading up to the film, that they were going to actually have him just kind of looking like himself, but, reprise Lando. And you don't really see it as much in the trailer, but when he first comes in, you see he basically has his full Lando hair. It's like, yes, he looks like Lando Calrissian. Acted like it, and he was actually in the movie more than I thought he would be too. True,
yeah, and he provided just enough of that that tie to the original trilogy that you needed.
Absolutely,
he gave you the kind of like the anchor point.
And Nine Numb was in there.
Yep,
which is great.
Yeah. So let's see. Okay, so now, what are some, JJ's bold decisions in this movie? Some of the things that was, JJ, you're pushing it. Not in a bad way necessarily. Or it could be. It could be a bad way. It could be good. What were some of the moments that you saw in Rise of Skywalker that you felt like JJ really pushed the boundaries? Or some scenes, I should say.
I mean, there was, well, of course, again, just to finish up.
And I'm talking about, let me just put it this way. The first half of the movie.
First half. Like up to what we've.
So up until, let's see. Before they go on to the Star Destroyer. I'll go there.
Well, I mean, I think that pretty much, I thought that him, first of all, bringing Palpatine the way that he brought him back, bringing Palpatine back at all was a really bold choice because, this is something that you knew was going to come up for early scrutiny because, especially with the way everybody reacted to The Last Jedi, it could be read into like, oh, yeah, in case of emergency, break glass kind of thing and, bring out Palpatine, save the Star Wars franchise. That's one step away from just bring Vader back.
Exactly.
But I thought that it was a bold choice. And honestly, the way he did it, I thought made perfect sense. To some of the things that he was having Rey go through, I thought was pretty cool because you could have played it more safe with Rey actually, but he didn't. He had her struggling. You could have, if you wanted to do this safe, and this is why I criticize some of the people who are actually saying, oh, he's playing this. Not really, because if you want to play it safe, and I'll give Rey as an example, you could have just had her already be powerful. She had read the Jedi text. You could have implied the fact that Luke's Force Ghost had been training her the whole time, and now, because remember, everybody thought she was just going to be training Jedi. That everybody figured, okay, enough time had passed. She's going to have her own little Jedi Academy. Well, what do you meet instead? You meet a Rey who's still unsure of herself, still doesn't know where she falls in the universe, questions it probably even more because she has all this power now. She doesn't understand why. And that's why I think the big reveal makes it even more poignant.
So for me, I think the bigger things that I really thought was bold from JJ in things that you're bringing up, Rey. So this is the first time we actually saw Force heal with the serpent.
Yeah.
So I thought that was different. That was like a bold thing. Like, okay, you're bringing in a new. It's something we've always known that existed, but I mean, we've never seen it.
I was going to say, I mean, everybody's making a big deal about it, but it's like, okay, if you read the expanded universe novels, that was one of the powers that was there, guys.
Yeah, no, but see, then it goes to that, to the whole accidentally like using the Force, and actually when she stopped that transport, and then she fried it with Force lightning. That freaked me out. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, because I was like, what's that all about?
Yeah, because once again, in the trailers, we've always saw that, or the featurette was when we first saw Darkseid Rey. So then when you see that, and then, then of course you have the juxtaposition of her and Kylo both fighting for this transport, and she's really angry. And so you see how it goes
leading up to that. So, they end up going to this yet another desert planet. Mm-hmm. And, pretty much they have to find, because they basically have to go on this thing to where they have to find a location of a Sith. It's basically kind of like a holocron, but they didn't call it that.
Right.
They called it something else. But they found this. Yeah, that's it, the Wayfinder, which... Mm-hmm. It was kind of like that. Very GPS sounding.
Yeah,
it kind of sounds a little.
Yeah,
they should have kept holocron.
Yeah, this sounds very Star Wars.
But anyway, in order to find out, because let's do this. Let's kind of go over the general plot, and then we can go into the points. So that way we don't limit ourselves. So essentially, they find that there's this dagger, and the dagger is written in the Sith language, and it can basically point the way to where Exegol is, so they can find Palpatine and destroy him. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the problem is that C-3PO, he can read the language, but he can't tell them the interpretation because it's a forbidden language, and his programming prevents it. Mm-hmm. So they're like, okay, fine, we got to go find a way to, to deal with this. Well, anyway, on the desert planet, this is where they run into this serpent creature, and she ends up healing it, and then it leaves him alone. And then, of course, Chewie ends up getting captured, and, the transport's flying away. And so she actually uses the Force to hold the transport, which I thought was actually really impressive, too. Yeah. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
This girl's really powerful.
Yep.
And again, part of you is going, okay, yeah, she's read the Jedi text, she's read all this stuff, but... just like in the other two movies, it's like, why is this girl so powerful? Mm-hmm. And that's why I think that JJ's, decisions and everything in this movie were really, really good, because she's holding this thing with the Force, and then, of course, Kylo lands. Now he's trying to pull the transport away from her. Mm-hmm. And then she's like trying with all her might, to keep the transport. And then she accidentally, just unleashes this big volley of Force lightning and blows the ship up. Yep. And, of course, you're led to believe that Chewbacca perished on the ship. Yep. Which he didn't, but you don't find that out for a while. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, as the movie goes on, they have to try to get C-3PO reprogrammed, hence the red eyes, and, he reads the Sith inscription, and then they eventually find Palpatine, and, of course... you find out that Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter. Yep. Which is exactly what I had been predicting for a long time. And one of the reasons why I also think it's interesting, because a lot of people go, oh, this is probably a bold choice from JJ. And I'm like, I'm not so sure he didn't intend that from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I said that, and many people have pointed this out, is the fact that when you looked at her lightsaber dueling style, and she had that kind of like stabbing motion and that thrusting, that was Palpatine's exact lightsaber style. Mm-hmm. So there were hints. Right. But what was really nice about it is the fact that, her and Kylo are sharing this bond, and then, of course, he eventually tells her all this stuff. Right. And naturally, she reacts in the way that you would expect. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that it was really interesting because just the way their dynamic was the whole movie, I thought was really cool. Well, yeah, I mean, that's because, I love the way they explain. He's like, the reason why, you're special, and the reason why because we have this
bond in the Force because you're a Palpatine, but I'm a Skywalker, and it's because our bloodline. I mean, like we come from two extremely powerful bloodlines that's actually been connected together. And so when you start to think about it, it's like, okay, Palpatine once again had this all along. He's like, if I can get a Skywalker to mesh with my bloodline, like it's like superpower, and that's what he's always been obsessed with, like power and life. Like those are the two factors
extending
that
his whole thing.
Yeah, extending his
and
legacy.
You find out later on, of course, his plan wasn't to kill Rey. He actually wants Rey to kill her, and then her to kill him, and then she becomes Empress Palpatine, and his like life force would then go into her, and then. So it's funny because you actually see the whole time I'm ticking off like, oh yeah, that rumor was kind of true, and that was true from a certain point of view, and and that was cool. But I mean, it's just like what's making this, and I'm sorry if this seems disjointed, guys, because there's just so much, and you really have to see it like 4 or 5 times, which I haven't gotten to that number yet. So it's sort of like things are popping in my head as I'm
just. We can't.
Yeah. But I mean, going back, just to tick off some big things, I thought that the new characters, Zori Bliss and Channa, I thought those were like really cool, actually. I was really surprised by how much I like these characters.
Especially Zori. I would like Zori.
Yeah. Zori was really cool.
Yeah.
I could see her getting like her own comic series and
like the Mandalorian type thing or
something. Like maybe another TV series or something, kind of like a Dr. Aphra kind of thing. Yeah. She's that kind of character, actually. She had a really good chemistry with the Poe Dameron character. There was so much in this movie to like, and there were a lot of answers that we got.
Yep.
But I thought that the way that the answers were given, I could see why people had issues. I personally, though, was really satisfied because to me, it really did tie the 9 films together. And I think that that's the thing you have to keep focused on.
Yeah. I think my issues were this, like with the film, I loved how they gave a lot of answers to the questions that we had. So we found out who Rey's parents were. We found out about Leia's background, which I thought that was a really cool scene to see, like a young Luke and Leia train.
That was actually
so
kind of a surprise where they did this whole young Luke and Leia training, and they actually put that. It was like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, and how they kind of concealed their faces just enough so it looks like
until of course the last shot.
Well, yeah. So I thought that was awesome.
That was awesome.
But I like the fact now. I was really hoping, really hoping that, especially when like Luke came back and he grabbed that lightsaber.
Oh yeah,
I thought he was actually back, and I was like, oh, he's still a Force ghost, but still cool. Cool.
Force ghost Luke was actually cool. So I mean, you have Rey's journey, but on the flip side of that, you also have Kylo's journey, And what I really like was, Kylo, of course, was his usual insane self. He ends up like force choking and flying some guy up to the ceiling, and
which is trying to be like a reminiscent of New Hope.
Yeah. That was a little bit of a nod to the whole Admiral Mahdi, Vader scene. The General Pride character I thought was really cool.
Really cool, and it's like a shocker because it's like, oh, he actually served under their...
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, he served under Palpatine's empire, and that's why. And it turns out, had been in contact with Palpatine
the whole time. Yeah,
because one of the funniest scenes was when Hux reveals himself to be the spy for the Resistance. And then they're like, "Oh, of course, or
I knew it.
I knew it." And it's like, "No, you didn't." And I mean, that was priceless. And unfortunately, Hux meets his end.
Yeah.
Which is too bad because I actually grew to like Hux a lot in The Last Jedi. Yeah. And, I thought that there could have been more, funny dynamics. They could have actually done a little thing like they did with Fulcrum, in Rebels.
That's kind of what it was. But you know what? Actually, like when you find out that Hux is a spy, it makes that scene in Last Jedi so much more poignant and funny at the same time. It's like after Snoke is dead, and then Hux is like takes his gun out. He's about to shoot Kylo, but then he sees him moving.
Here's the thing that's interesting, though. I don't think he was a spy at that point. Because they really don't talk about the spy until the beginning of this movie, and it wasn't until, Kylo basically ascended to Supreme Leader and then just kind of went crazy. Because remember what Hux says not too long before he meets his end. It's like, I don't care if you win, I just want him to lose.
Yeah.
And that's basically what it comes down to, and it's just too bad that maybe they couldn't keep him around, but... Mm-hmm. Him dying at the hands of Pride, I thought was really good. I mean, Richard E. Grant was so good in this role.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just really good as General Pride. And usually those Imperial guys are almost throwaway guys.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he was just like such a memorable, good character.
You could see him being like another Tarkin.
Yeah. I'd love to see him in other stuff. Like, I'd actually read a book about his backstory. I mean, he was just that interesting to me.
Yeah. So... a couple of things. So, one, of course, was one of my issues were, okay, we didn't find out how Palpatine survived to begin with.
Right. Yeah, you would have liked to have seen something about how he came back. Not just the fact that, if you want to go back to the opening crawl, how about just saying, hey, Palpatine escaped and,
Yeah, or he was survived by some... techs or whatever. Right. They grabbed him as soon as he fell, and they was able to put him on life support until something. So like, okay, that was one. Of course, there's this whole thing with like Finn wanted to tell Rey something, which we believe is to be "I love you" or "I'm in love with you" or whatever the case. Basically him expressing his feelings. Yeah, but it's like we never got that.
Get the context if you haven't seen. I mean, if you're watching the spoiler review, we're assuming you've seen the movie.
Yeah.
So of course it was the part where
he kept trying to.
Yeah, they were sinking in that sand or whatever, and he kept trying to say, oh, there's something I need to tell you or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're right. That did kind of bother me that they never really revisited that.
Yeah. So that.
I mean, maybe it wasn't important. Maybe it was because you kind of knew what he was going to say, and.
Yeah, especially when Finn was. I mean, Poe was like, "Oh, when Poe's not around," that whole thing.
Oh man, that was so funny.
It was so funny. He's like, "Yes, actually, when you're not around." So I mean, like that whole thing between the two of the three of them was like just a whole little weird triangle. Was cool, but. Some of the other things that I really didn't care for was the I lost it. It's
obviously
because it's so much stuff that you like have to try to, it's like, no pun intended, sit through. But I think one of it is the whole Rey and Kylo thing. Like, okay, like how this will kind of confuse me. So like, I get the fact that you can see into each other's like location or locale or where because you're connected, but like now you're pulling stuff out of their thing. It's just like, granted, we saw that in Last Jedi too a little bit.
Yeah, because the water came.
The water, yeah.
Like,
but it's still kind of like, okay, like what is that? Like,
well, it's because when you're connected in the Force, if you think about it, it's no different than Vader choking somebody on his ship who's on like a planet like 1,000 miles away. The Force actually goes through it. It's not a space and time kind of thing. It's like kind of all in one. It surrounds us. It binds us. If you're actually connected to somebody through the Force,
I mean, I get like you can talk to somebody or like, all that type of. I mean, I guess, but I guess like you having a whole battle with someone. It's like, well, why do you need to be with them in the first place? If what I'm saying, it's like,
I know, and I will say that there probably needs to be a little bit more exposition.
Yes.
Can we get a few parameters on how this whole thing works?
Thank you.
Because, and I'll agree with that. I mean, they really do. See, here's the thing, and if you guys saw the movie, you know what we're talking about,
mm-hmm.
and this is something that they tend to do in Star Wars, but they really do this heavily in the sequel trilogy, and that's they'll give you a bunch of things that you're supposed to just accept, but they don't really tell you why or how. Now, in this movie, it moves so quickly, you don't really have time. You know, it's no different than like if, you know, you're in some sort of a fight with somebody and they say something to you and then, you know, you walk away and you're like, oh, man, I should have said this, this, and this because it all occurs to you afterwards. And that's what this is like. It's kind of like you're watching this stuff, you know, and then a day later you're like, wait a minute. How did that happen? How do you reach and grab a necklace off of somebody?
Yeah, and it's like, it's tangible. Like, he handed it off. They analyzed the stupid thing. I mean, it's like, okay, and then the fact that they had a whole duel.
Yeah, and if you're going to do that, why not do more stuff? And yeah, then they have a duel, and they're like they're just like, and then the helmet drops where Kylo is. Like, okay, and it's like, oh, she must be in my quarters, and you're like, okay. Anybody want to, I don't know, explain how this happens?
Exactly.
And I agree. It was done a lot more realistically in the Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. It wasn't as. I mean, I have to say though, Rian Johnson did open the door when there were certain things like the water sprayed on Kylo, or you know, I mean, because if you think about it, when Kylo started talking to Rey when she was in Ahch-To, you know, he was sitting with her on like one of those rocks.
And they were about to touch, you know, their hands was like, and they kept referencing.
Then Luke kind of came in like the father of a teenage daughter and a boy's caught in the room, you know? Exactly. I mean, it's kind of one of those things, but still, it's kind of like they put just enough of it in The Last Jedi that opens the door for what JJ did in Rise of Skywalker, but I think it was, even though it was just as weird in The Last Jedi, it wasn't as crazy outrageous like it was in Rise of Skywalker.
Right. The other thing I didn't like were the whole horses. That was stupid
on the
to
Star
me.
Destroyer.
Yes, that was stupid to me. That made
now let me ask you this
sense.
though: Did you feel that way when you saw the trailer too?
When I saw the trailer, I didn't have the context, so like I didn't know like how like. When I saw the trailer, I knew they were on like. See, I thought they were like on one of the Death Stars or something, like a remnant of the Death Star, and it was just like I didn't really pay attention to the background.
See, that's funny because I always knew they were on Star Destroyers, and I think that's why that didn't bother me as much.
But just thinking like, okay, so you mean to tell me that you land in the middle of space on a Star Destroyer and you're running around on a horse?
The idea behind it is that there's a gravity thing that surrounds the Star Destroyers. That's one of the reasons, like my dad always used to say, well, how is it that, you know, the Millennium Falcon lands in what seems to be this open bay on the Death Star and everybody's walking around and nobody's blown out into space? And I'm like, well, there's a force field that's covering that door. It's not like it's just an open, you know, like window kind of thing.
Right.
Well, they've expanded that. And this isn't just in the sequel trilogy. I mean, this is something that's been in canon for a long time. Is that these ships have like a gravity, I don't know, shield or thing or something that actually surrounds the ship. Now, that said, one of the things that's interesting, I know they do this in Star Trek a lot. I don't remember if they've ever done this in Star Wars, where they had to have like magnetic boots or something to walk around
in the hull,
the outside or the hull or whatever.
Yeah.
If they did, that would really make it ridiculous.
Well, okay, so once again, like,
but it is kind of ridiculous anyway.
Yeah, because my thing is like, okay, you got horses, but yet like you're setting off bombs and grenades and everything's exploding. Like that's got to do something to the shield that's magically supposed to be there. So once again, like you're honestly, in the vacuum of space.
Where I had the problem with it. I had I was accepting it
right
because it was fun and it was cool.
It's
and
a fairy tale. I know.
You know, it's not science fiction.
Right. It's science fantasy.
It's science fantasy, which everybody seems to forget.
True.
On the other hand, where it started to take me out a little bit is that, when all these bombs and stuff are going off, I'm like, So how are these people like still on the surface of this ship?
Not only that, but I mean, you got people still on the surface of the ship that's got to do something to this whatever magic force field that's around this thing.
And that's basically it. And that's why it took me out of it, because I'm like, okay.
And then how are you breathing? Like, okay, I get it's a ship landing, but now there's oxygen out in space. Like,
well, if it's a force field thing,
I guess.
But yeah, why would they actually pump oxygen out there?
Yeah, and then of course, yeah, it's just a lot. It's a lot. So that whole scene was kind of like, yeah, stupid.
And it was unnecessary.
Yeah, it really was.
It was just, you could tell that somebody got drunk one night and was just like, hey, what if we had horses on a Star Destroyer? And JJ's like, yeah, that'd be cool.
Like Braveheart or something.
Yeah,
it's
we've
like
never
on the Star
seen
Destroyer.
Like Braveheart on a Star Destroyer. It would have made more sense if they actually landed in the docking bay.
Yeah.
And then launched all the horses and then just started riding around the ship or something.
You got all these Aborigine type people just running around with bow and arrows. I mean, it was almost kind of like, once again, like a nod to the whole Wicked and
the Ewok thing.
Yeah. So,
and it's like, oh, what if it was Ewoks in space or something? You know, I mean, it's
like,
yeah, that was kind of dumb.
Yeah, it was kind of dumb.
I'll go along with it.
I do like the way, I did like the way they handled Leia. Although, once again, see, if she did the same thing that Luke did, that would have made more sense to me, her like dying.
There's a reason for that, and I started reading about that. This has to do with the Harrison Ford cameo.
Okay.
So let's talk about that. So I'm part of Kylo's journey back to the light side. Mm-hmm. And this is another thing that I actually loved, because as you know, you and I were always sitting there thinking like, okay, if they redeem Kylo, which I hope they don't, but if they do, it has to be handled very correctly, or it's either going to be too reminiscent of Vader, or it's just going to be stupid. And this is the one thing that I thought that Rise of Skywalker got 1,000% right, is how they handled the redemption of Kylo Ren, because it was not done in a cliched way, and it was very organic to me.
Okay.
So, you know, the idea was, if you were paying attention, and I noticed this, but I didn't notice this. So just so you guys know, anybody's seen the movie, you know that Han Solo is back as sort of like the
Force ghost.
But he's not a Jedi.
Exactly.
But here's what happened. And if you're paying attention to the movie, Leia, when she was talking to, I don't know, somebody at the base, alluded to the fact like, okay, she could sense that Kylo was sort of on the fence, because she like called out to him, Ben, and that's when Rey stabbed him. And then, you know, that's when Rey's like, oh crap, or whatever. She heals him or whatever, and then goes. And this is when, before this scene, like in between that, Leia's like, okay, I got to go try to reach him, or whatever she says. What she actually did was she projected herself in the form of Han Solo to Ben. And that's why, if you noticed, and she kind of like projected herself a little bit to him. If you notice, when Kylo eventually dies, that's when Leia disappears too.
Yeah.
It's because a lot of that was connected. And I was wondering that even during the movie. It's like, okay, I get that Kylo's seeing Han, but it's like, and he's having this conversation. At first I thought, well, maybe he's just kind of imagining this.
Right.
But I'm like, no, this is Star Wars. And then I realized that, oh yeah, Leia's projecting. She's kind of using that Luke trick in a way.
Okay.
But she's projecting Han Solo because she knew that that's where he needs to find that closure.
See, you know what? Not hearing you explain that, I actually like that scene now, because at first I didn't like the way they redeemed Kylo, because I felt, one, it was too fast. I felt like it was just like, you know, I felt like it was more about Rey and the fact that she was like, oh, tender, like, okay, yeah, I stabbed you, but I really didn't want to kill you, so let me save you type thing. And that's what I thought that was the whole redemption play. Like, you know what, you know, this is what this is supposed to be. We have this connection. I understand like her and, you know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking that's where they were going. And then the whole Han thing, like you said, I thought it was just like in his mind, like, okay, you know, this is, but when you put it in that context of Leia projecting Han to Kylo, that's actually pretty dope. Like,
yeah,
when you really think about it,
because
like, that
like,
makes...
And she only did it when she realized that Kylo was back on the fence again. Because this is what I thought was really, really cool. And if you look at this as an entire arc on the sequel, I'm not talking about the whole saga, obviously, the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
When we meet Kylo, he's being tempted by the light, right? And then it's kind of like, that really continues through the middle of The Last Jedi. And then he finally decides, you know what? But a lot of that has to do with the fact, and this goes back to some of the things like the pundits like Harloff and Campy and all those guys are always saying, which is like, well, he killed Han Solo. He can't go back. What's cool about this movie is Kylo feels the same way. Like, you know, when Rey's like, listen, you know, come back. I know you want to. He's like, I can't. You know, look, I killed my dad. I mean,
yeah,
it's
I've done too much. Yeah.
Like, I actually wouldn't mind coming back, but can't happen. I might as well stay dark because, I mean, I can't do it. You know, and that's what's sort of cool is that it really isn't that fast. I mean, he just feels that after all of his actions and everything that he just has to follow this through, and he goes a little crazy. And it isn't until he wrecked all this destruction, and then he meets Palpatine, and he sees like, oh man, okay, this guy's really evil. You know, I'm not like this guy. You know, and it's like, then of course Rey is always like trying to reach out to him, and that's what I'm saying. It wasn't done in the same way that Anakin was redeemed.
Well, no, but I think like in the way with Kylo, I think it was more so along the lines of like, okay, he's about to kill her, you know, and then that's when Leia kind of distracts him. And so it's just like he was all set to go, you know, but, you know, of course, he felt his mom's presence. So now he's like, huh? You know, but now it brings up The Last Jedi because the conversation Luke had with Leia before he went out and faced him was like, you know he's gone, right? And she was just like, yeah, I know. And so she was like, so it's basically like, I know I can't do, my son is gone. I can't do anything about it. It's just, this is his path he chose. But, you know, I think she was trying more so for Rey's sake. But like, okay, I'm gonna just try to reach out and, you know, this will be the moment to stop him. But then Rey, of course, heals Kylo physically.
Yeah, because, and this is another thing that I thought was really interesting too, because Rey actually killed him like almost like a dark side moment. Because she didn't have to.
No.
She was just like, you know, and just like, just stabs him.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, she's like, oh, yeah, you know that darkness I'm always kind of feeling? Yeah, it kind of took over for a second. Oh, I don't really want to be this way. Let me heal him.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you kind of have to wonder, like, okay, did that play a part in it, too?
I think it did, because when she healed him, first of all, there's two things going on.
Because she's pushing life energy. And
that's number one.
Yeah.
Number one, you got this light side thing where he's probably feeling all warm and fuzzy from it. The second thing is that, you know, he's probably like, wow, you know, this girl could have just, I'm a dark side guy. She should have just ended me, but she didn't. And that probably made him start to go, you know, almost like the South Park thing. You know, I learned something today. You know, where I think it really helped. And then, of course, Leia probably sensed this, pushed out, because, you know, he even said, well, you know, look, I killed my dad. I mean, it's kind of over for me.
Right.
So she leaves, and then, of course, you know.
But it makes sense, though, because, you know, now thinking back, you know, when the person on the base was like, well, you know, where's the general? And she was like, well, she has to go do something. But she said she's not coming back because it's going to take all of her energy to do this.
Right. That was that
and
whole,
that was
like,
that Luke force projection.
Obviously, Luke said, hey, I learned this new trick, by the way.
Yeah. So add this to your repertoire. But
well, now here's what's so funny, too. You know, when you first heard the voice saying, "Hey, kid," I totally thought that was Luke's Force ghost about to talk to him.
Yeah, because he did say, "See you around." So
Yeah.
I thought that was.
And it kind of sounded a little like him, you know, because Luke was kind of grumpy, like Harrison.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is like they rehashed that whole conversation they had on the bridge.
I know,
too.
and I thought that was so brilliant.
Yeah,
I thought that was so cool.
I don't have the strength. He's like, yes, you do. You know.
Yeah, and when he was like, I need you to help me do it, but now it's like it's not me going dark, it's me going light. I thought that was cool. Well, I know a lot of people are going to be critical of it, but I thought it was really cool.
The only thing I didn't like was it was once again fan service, and it was like, all right, the whole I know. Like,
yeah,
I was like, all right, did they have to do that?
I know. There's some of the stuff you're like, okay, dude. But I have to say, man, that was the one thing that blew my, like, Harrison. I did not expect Harrison Ford to actually come and do this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when he turned around and it was him.
Yeah.
I was like,
I saw the water welling in your eyes.
Way.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, he's Han Solo again.
Yep.
Because that was actually one of the things, you know, being that I couldn't believe that Harrison Ford agreed to do 7. One of the things that bummed me out, even though it perfectly made sense story-wise when they killed him off, was like, oh, man, we just got him back. Now there's like no more, you know, Han Solo. And so to see him have this whole like really meaty scene, and now it's like a reverse of what we saw in Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah, you really into
I was beside myself on that scene.
Yeah.
And then the Luke thing too. You know, when Rey was just like, okay, she was done, and she throws her lightsaber in the fire, and then that hand reaches out and catches it. Which
is also reminiscent of Force Awakens again. Because remember, we always say you wanted Luke to be the one to grab the saber.
Yeah.
Now he did.
Well, and it's funny because in a way, it's not the way we all wanted it as fans, but everybody's like, oh, ignite the green or whatever. Well, he technically did in The Last Jedi.
And he also did in Rise of Skywalker.
Yep.
With that flashback scene with he and Leia dueling in the Force. So
yeah. So, I mean,
and we actually got to see them fight again.
Yeah, and it was kind of cool. I actually thought that the Luke scenes were really cool. And I thought that, you know, when Luke was basically coming to her, it was very reminiscent of when Yoda came to Luke to set him back straight.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'm sure, you know, I mean, she's like, oh, man, I'm a Palpatine. I mean, like, really?
I'm
like
the scum of the earth at this point.
Yeah, it's like, can I just go back to when I didn't know who I was again?
Yeah. What was cool. And, of course, you know, we finally get to, they actually find that, you know, the Wayfinder, and you know, then of course.
Let me bring this up too, because that reminds me of something, and I don't want to leave this out of this review. It was so good to see C-3PO actually get a lot of action and screen time in this movie.
Yeah,
I thought Anthony Daniels did like a supreme job.
Yes,
like and the comedy for him was hilarious.
I still laugh at the line. Like, honestly, because one of the things I didn't like about this movie is that, like, you know, in all the other movies, we got, like, quotable lines. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I find your lack of faith disturbing, or, you know, I love you, I know, that type of stuff. But I was like, you know what? We really don't have anything in this. I mean, there was maybe like...
Oh, I'm sure there are. But I mean, again, there's so much in this movie, though.
The one that only stuck out to me was when, you know, I kill Snoke, I'm going to kill you too.
Yeah.
That one was funny. But the 3PO line was hilarious. It's like, I noticed you called everyone's name but mine. that had me like rolling.
Yeah, but I'm okay.
Yeah, but
I mean, there was a lot of like really funny jokes in this.
The 3PO humor was hilarious.
And the new droid, Dio.
Oh, yeah.
Dio was hilarious. He was somebody that I was kind of like, oh, man, are they going to try to introduce another cute droid or whatever? But I ended up falling in love with him, too.
Well, yeah, but he didn't have to do a whole lot, though.
I mean, it was just like his personality was different, though.
Yeah, I mean,
and I mean, a lot of it, the way that he was, you know,
he looked like a little kid. It's almost like a baby droid or something. But the thing I felt like he was useless except for that one thing. Is like the fact that
but I mean, he was supposed to just be
the information. But other than that,
but that's the thing, though. I mean, it's like that's one of the things that always drives me nuts about a lot of other movies. Is like if you introduce a character, they have to do some monumental thing, or it's like a waste. It's like no, you know. I mean, sometimes
you're just here for a moment.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if you think about it, the new characters, you could argue that it would have been nice to have given them more to do because they were so good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was almost like how, you know, when we talk about the TV series Frasier.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I have always said, you know what? You take even these side characters, and not even the regular side characters, but ones that pop up in like maybe a little story arc, you could do a whole series on them just because they're so well written. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how Zori Bliss and Jana were. You know, is where you could almost like, you know, do novels and comics or whatever off of them. And it
Which
was
we probably would get.
And it was nice to see that even though we don't get to see a lot of them, you know, everybody played some sort of a role. And again, it's kind of like one of the other criticisms is characters that were introduced, like, say, Rose. But, you know, Rose, while she wasn't like some prominent, like on the adventure, she was there throughout the movie.
True.
Doing some stuff.
Yeah, she was just kind of on base, you know, doing her normal job anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, she was featured. She was actually featured more than I thought she would be. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the whole thing, you know, when 3PO was about to get his mind wiped and he was like,
I just thought of another way we can get around this.
Yeah, and then they like deactivated or whatever. And, you know, then of course when he was reading the Sith script and he sounded all kind of evil and stuff.
Yeah.
And
but then he brought him back, you know, and he's like, I think I knew if I had a best friend. And like R2's reaction to him was hilarious.
Oh, man. I mean, that was the other thing, too, when he was like reintroducing himself and Poe's like, oh, man, are we going to have to listen to this all the time now?
Well, the funny thing, like, we still haven't found the volume button yet.
Yeah.
That was still priceless.
And then, of course, you know, and speaking of the whole comedy of the thing, one of the funniest lines to me actually came from Palpatine. You know, at the end when he was like, going to Kylo, like, hey, how did he, what was it?
Oh, he was like, it was a Skywalker who tossed me down in the shaft.
Yeah, down a shaft, so now I'm going to toss you down a shaft or something. It's like, yeah, still a little raw about that one, aren't we?
Yeah, still a little upset. But one of the things, speaking of Palpatine, since we're at the close of, you know, the movie, you know, him draining the life force from Rey and Kylo.
And again, I know that this is going to tweak people out.
But I actually like that, though.
I did, too.
I mean, because it's like, it makes sense.
Makes sense.
And
I know it's new, but everybody's like, well, we've never seen that in a movie before. It's like, well, you know, you never saw a lot of things in the movie before till they introduced it.
Right. Exactly. That's
what
it's
you
called an introduction.
only want force pushing and force choking and lightning. Is that we never saw lightning until Return of the Jedi?
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
Speaking of which, holy crap.
Oh, yes. That volley of lightning that...
What?
You know.
Man. Look.
And I thought he was really great with the whole Emperor thing. I thought it was cool because one of the things that I was worried about with this movie was that you're either going to have the Emperor do too much or too little. You know, because if you think about it, this is 30 years after Return of the Jedi. He wasn't exactly young in Return of the Jedi. Mm-mm. So it's kind of like, okay, you know, how powerful could he possibly be? And it's like, what could he do? But I thought it was brilliant how it was sort of like, I mean, I hate to say it, but it was kind of like a Voldemort type of thing.
Well, I called that one too, though.
You did. Yep. You did. That was you.
I was like, yeah, he's probably going to like, you know, because it makes the most sense. You got two of the most powerful Force users around. If he can somehow siphon that, which, you know, and then actually...
Yeah, and what was cool was when he drained their life force and he kind of looks at his fingers like, hey, sweet, and then starts to
now he's like,
go to town on him.
He's like, oh, no, I don't need you guys. I can go back to being the Emperor now. It's like,
that's what I thought was kind of cool. Yeah, he like drains it. It's almost... And this is what I thought was so brilliant about it, was almost like, hey, I didn't actually realize I could do this.
Well, it's like almost like kind of a... You kind of have to wonder, like, was that his... Because that's the thing with the
I don't
Emperor.
think it was. Remember his plan? The idea was Rey was going to like kill him, sacrifice him, so his life force could go into her, and then he would kind of almost like rule
Possess
by
her.
proxy.
Yeah, but see, the other thing is, though...
But I mean, he would actually be in her. Like all those rumors about Palpatine possessing Rey ended up being true.
Yeah, to a certain extent, at least.
But that was the plan anyway.
But then before then, though, the other plan was that Kylo was going to be like the supreme leader.
Well, it was one of those deals where I think Palpatine was kind of
He kind of like had a plan for a plan for a plan.
Yeah, like
almost.
kind of some contingencies. But that was what was so funny was when he took both of them and drained their life force and kind of looked at his fingers and like, ooh.
And he's feeling good about himself.
Yeah, like, hey.
I don't need this stupid little crane, this little jib that's
like,
holding me up.
It's like, this is awesome. I can actually just drain all their life force and then be Emperor Palpatine again. This is sweet.
And now I don't have to worry about anybody because now it's like, I don't have to worry about going to the light side, you know.
Well, and I'm kind of glad that, you know, because one of the rumors had him be the daughter, but it was almost like he
cloned her or something like that.
Well, no, he wanted like a family connection or something weird. And I'm like, I don't know, man. That seems a little weird to me. So the way that they actually did this in this movie, I thought was great.
And he knew that would be the thing that Ray wanted the most. And he's always using things to hold over people. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like one of those things that he knew he could use against Ray.
Absolutely.
Like, look, I'm about to destroy. It's kind of like, once again, Return of the Jedi, like your friends on the moon, you know, or when he showed them like.
He kind of did that whole thing.
They're walking into a trap.
Little, like sky roof or whatever, you know, and it's like parted and she saw like all that. And then, of course, he let loose that crazy lightning.
I just want Palpatine around for like DTE. Like if I could just get him hooked up to like some of my power boxes and stuff like that, and I just get all my, you know, electricity from him, I'm good. Like I don't have to worry about DTE as long as I have
the
Palpatine.
Only thing, and that actually kind of brings me to the thing that the only thing that disappointed me mildly. Mm-hmm. It didn't really disappoint me because it makes sense, but it was Palpatine's death. The fact that, you know, she basically pulled a Mace Windu.
Yeah,
and it was kind of like where I thought it was a little weak was, okay, she's deflecting the lightning back on him. Now, the thing I thought was interesting, and this proves my point to me with the Mace thing, because a lot of people have argued that Palpatine kept shooting the lightning because he wanted to deform himself to fool the Senate. And don't get me wrong, that was a good theory. Mm-hmm. But to me, it still didn't make
the most sense.
A whole lot of sense. This movie actually confirms to a large degree what I had been saying, is that once he's doing that, it's almost like he's kind of lost control.
You know what? Honestly, I think what it is with him, and this is the case with most people who, because this is the problem with power, one, and the problem with the dark side of the Force is it makes you arrogant. Yeah. Palpatine is just like, look, I'm the most powerful Force user. I have, like, you're my child. I have to be able to beat you. You know what I'm saying? That's almost like...
Well, and that's what I thought was so cool, because, you know, he's kind of like, well, I'm all the Sith or whatever. She's like, oh, yeah, I'm all the Jedi. And that's what I thought was cool, too, because I did get confirmation. It was Anakin, Mace, Obi-Wan, Yoda, like everybody, you know, that was speaking up at the end. And then she's like, no, I'm all the Jedi or whatever. But I thought that was great, and I didn't have a problem with it in and of itself. It was just kind of like, okay, I'm deflecting the lightning, and oh, look, now I got two lightsabers, and I'm deflecting the lightning. Now, is the fact that it's because it's Luke and Leia's lightsabers or something? You know what I mean? It's like,
no, I just think that it's just, you know, she's just, I think she's just trying to keep it, to just kind of have something to keep it off of her as much as possible. And it's like, why wouldn't you? But it's also, like she said, you just gotta, I mean, the barrage of...
Obviously, it's the Jedi were
helping her.
Probably helping her and empowering her as well. And so, I mean, like I said, I was mostly satisfied with that. And then at the very end, when she goes back to the Lars homestead, buries the lightsabers, and created the yellow lightsaber. Yeah. Which actually is interesting, because I don't know how canon all this stuff is anymore, but there's like a lightsaber color chart. Yeah. And yellow was actually for like, it kind of matched her personality in a way. So I wonder if that was something, because I know, Chris, what's the co-writer's name?
Chris Terrio.
Yeah. You know, he keeps up on a lot of that stuff. And he actually introduced a lot of all this, these like canon storylines and stuff to JJ, so it wouldn't surprise me if it's like when she built her own, what looked like a double-bladed lightsaber to me.
Yeah.
Even though she didn't ignite the other end. Mm-hmm. And it turned out to be yellow.
It looked like it was part of the staff that she had. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, and it could have been.
The parts of it, like the hilt looks like part of this. Because I used to always wonder, like, why does she carry a staff and a lightsaber and a blaster? Like, what do you need all three?
Rounded.
Yeah, man. I'm like...
But you're right. I know. But I mean, the thing that was really interesting to me was, like, I wonder if that doing it yellow was a conscious decision. Like, I don't think it was one of those, well, we haven't used that color yet, No,
I think it was definitely intentional.
Yeah, and it actually makes me want to see more, like, Rey-themed Star Wars movies now.
Well, that's the thing, too. And, now that we've come to the end of this, like the very end, how we were, like, months and months ago when they were like, man, like, the last shot of the movie is just, like, going to take your breath away.
Yeah.
Get it?
Yes.
The whole
her looking at the twin sons thing. I was like, wow. Now, was it the way they made it out to be, though?
Yeah.
Seemed like it was going to be some, like, crazy, the way they made it out to be was a little bit more than what it really was. But from an emotional level, it was kind of like... it'd come full circle, and then, when she was like, well, I'm Rey, Skywalker. Because that was another thing. Now, when Jeremy Jahns did his interview, or his review, he hated that. He actually was like, no, she should have said Palpatine and, just try to clear the name. And I'm like, no, because if you think about it, why would she want to take his name?
Yeah.
Luke and Leia were the family to her. Luke and Leia were the ones that were... she would want to take the name of somebody she cared about and honored and gave her, all that.
Mm-hmm. Well, not only that, but it's kind of like, if you really think about it, I mean, people might have known I guess so, yeah. Never mind. But to that point, though, yeah, it made perfect sense for her to become. I mean, and that's why, like, JJ, because everybody kept saying, like, okay, what's the Rise of Skywalker about? So, like, he's like, trust me, you'll understand when you see the movie. It's like, well, yeah, you understand. That's why I understand. It's like, it makes perfect sense that,
Well, I think it's actually multi-headed, too, because if you think about it, it's like you had Ben Solo turning back to the light side, so that he has Skywalker blood in him. He's
technically a Skywalker.
So, he's doing that. Obviously, she's now taking on the name of Skywalker and going to continue that tradition.
Yeah, continue the legacy of Skywalker, yeah.
Right. The Jedi being pretty much back.
Which is also another thing for me. That's what it was.
I'm glad I reminded you.
Thank you. It's almost like I did you yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
But... okay, so at the end of this, JJ said there'll be the end of the Jedi and the Sith, but we got a Jedi at the end of this, so
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's the end of the Jedi, maybe as we know it, because if you think about it, one of the things that JJ was alluding to was the fact that it wasn't going to be the same as what the Jedi were. Now, granted, that's semantics. Like, you could see how the Sith are destroyed. But yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's like, I don't know, it almost kind of looks like she's just going to go...
Because Luke, when Luke is like, conquering fear is like the journey of a Jedi. Like, every Jedi has, like, what do you fear the most? What are you afraid of?
Right.
So it's like the whole point was to make her a Jedi. And
yeah,
like,
and now she's a Jedi, so it's kind of like, well...
Yeah, you said that was going to be the end of it.
Well,
so.
maybe that was one of JJ's infamous... Hey, listen, if that's the only misdirection that he gave us, that's not bad.
I mean, true. But, so...
So what's your final thoughts on... The Rise of Skywalker.
Final thoughts of Rise of Skywalker. I thought it was great. I want to see it again and again, just so I can get everything about it. And it really was just a fun movie. I think there were a lot of good things done, and a lot of risks that he took where good risks, and I think they weren't. It wasn't too much. I think it was just enough. Fan service on some things. Some things were a little bit on the nose. Some things were really cool. Like, I like how they kind of went back to the whole, because he had, like, in the third act, Rey had kind of burned the whole TIE fighter thing, and she was just like, all right, I'm done. I'm staying here, just like Luke. And he's like, no. It's like, well, how am I going to, well, you have everything you need right here. And then to see, that was a cool thing, to finally see Luke
the X-Wing.
raise the X-Wing, because it's like, that was one thing that we never saw him complete. That was kind of like a
that was kind of one of those things that it's kind of like, hey, I could do this now.
Yep, easily.
And, like I said, one of the things that was really cool for me in The Last Jedi was actually seeing Luke's X-Wing. Even though it was underwater, it's like, all things, I got chills seeing his X-Wing.
Yeah.
Well, now to not only see it, but you're seeing him raise it up, and now you're actually seeing it in action.
Yeah, Rey is actually piloting with the helmet on and everything.
Seeing Wedge Antilles in the space battle was kind of a goosebump moment.
And then, of course, they said I could see Red 5, and I'm just like, wow. I was like, yeah, there's Red 5 going across. I'm like, how do you guys know about Red 5? But it's like, oh, yeah, it's an old, I'm like, all right, sweet.
It's an older code, but it still checks out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's basically, where I'm at, too. I mean, same exact thoughts, actually. Like I said, to see some of these older characters pop up, to see Harrison Ford come back to it was really cool. And what was nice was it was fan service, but it fit very well into the story for me.
Yeah.
And it
was well placed.
And it wasn't too much. I mean, yeah, some of it was a little, like you said, on the nose, kind of where you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, JJ. But
yeah,
it didn't take me out of the movie. And that was what was important to me. Don't take me out of the movie.
Right.
Not that you really had a whole lot of time to be taken out of the movie, because you're just, by the time something bothered you, they were on to something else. And I think that was it. And I know, again, do I understand the criticisms that a lot of people are lobbying toward this film? I get it. I don't agree with it.
Okay.
More so than like with The Last Jedi. With The Last Jedi, even though I enjoyed the film, I was kind of like, you know what? If you had issues with The Last Jedi, I get it, man, and I'm right there with you. Even though I don't share that, I'm right there with you. Rise of Skywalker, I'm not with them. It's like, I understand it, but you know what? I'm not with you. This is a good Star Wars movie. It was fun. It was a satisfying conclusion. There is no way on the planet, well, any of the planets, that, they could have tied this up in a way that would have made everybody happy. There just isn't.
Yeah.
JJ did what he could, not to mention the fact that, The Last Jedi took it in such a weird direction.
Yeah.
And a lot of people accused him of retconning it, but he actually didn't really retcon a whole lot of it.
No.
He more or less took some of the stuff and continued it. And, he patched up a few things, but he could have done a lot more if he had wanted to.
Yeah.
What he should have done was written an entire treatment for 7, 8, and 9, and then done 7. And if he wanted to have somebody else do 8, but, write the treatment, write the story, and just have somebody else, direct it or whatever. That's what should have happened. But honestly, all things considered, I think we got a really good ending to this saga. I'm, like you, looking forward to seeing it a gazillion more times and and everything else. But the important thing is you guys.
Before we get to them, if you had to give it a letter grade.
A letter or a number?
A letter. So like A, B, C, D.
I'll probably go with a B plus. Can I do pluses and minuses?
Yes, you can.
I'm going to give it a B plus. I'll give it a B plus because, look, Empire Strikes Back is the A.
Yeah.
I would go A minus probably for, New Hope and Return of the Jedi. I'd probably go for like
We got to do this on
C- or a D for like Attack of the Clones. Because that's my least favorite. And it's funny because some people, this movie is their least favorite Star Wars movie.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But
we'll probably have to like rank ours. Now that this is out, we'll eventually have to re-rank our movies.
Yeah,
again.
we'll have to do the rank again and go it. Yeah. But What about you? What about you for a letter grade?
I'll go with you. B+.
B+?
B+, yeah.
Well, I guess it won't be a Duel of the Fates segment.
Well, maybe. You never know.
We could do Rise of Skywalker versus some other movie, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, what about you guys? What letter grade would you give it? You heard all our thoughts. You heard a lot of the spoilers. Total spoiler discussion. So, have at it in the comments section. Let us know what you guys think below. But that was our spoiler discussion of Rise of Skywalker. I am sure this is not going to be the last time that we discuss this movie.
Oh, no.
By any stretch of the imagination. There'll be box office reports. There'll be all kinds of stuff. But, this was where we're discussing the movie and reviewing it. You guys let us know what you think in the comments below. And we'll see you guys next week. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.